Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Open Observability Talks. I'm your host, Dotan Horvitz, and here at Open Observability Talks, we talk about anything DevOps, observability, and of course, open source. So may the open source be with you. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Logs.io, the cloud-native observability platform. Logs.io takes the best-of-breed open source projects such as Prometheus, OpenSearch, and Jaeger, and offers them as a unified observability platform built for scale. For those joining the live stream on YouTube or Twitch, feel free to share questions and comments on the chat to make things more interesting for us. And with that, let's move on to today's episode. Last month, August 2023, HashiCorp announced changing the license of its open source tools to non-open source business source license 1.1. This means Terraform, Vault, Packer, Console, and others. And obviously, it created turmoil in the industry and the community. I was in the midst of my summer vacation when suddenly I started getting messages from all over the place to my cell phone. Why did this happen? What does that mean? We'll talk about this today. And also, there's a work on forking Terraform to keep it open called OpenTF. What is OpenTF about? Who's behind it? What's the plan for it? We'll discuss that as well. To discuss these, I invited Omry Hay, co-founder and CTO of Env0. Env0 is a player in the Terraform ecosystem. It provides an automation solution based on Terraform, a competitor offering to HashiCorp's Terraform Cloud, to be perfectly transparent here. And Env0 is also one of the creators of OpenTF, the fork I mentioned, and a member of the project's steering committee. So let me invite Omry to join me. Hey, Omry, good morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good morning.
Okay. Good morning. Finally having someone from my time zone. You're also based in Israel, and I know you from the local DevOps community. So glad to have you on the show finally.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, you're founder and CTO of Env0. We'll mention that in a bit, but let's jump straight to the big news about the relicensing, HashiCorp's relicensing. Obviously, most of the conversation here and your domain is Terraform, but the change wasn't just about Terraform being affected, right? So can you walk us through the other projects that got affected, just to make sure that the audience is familiar?
Sure. So HashiCorp has eight projects. All of them were open source up until like a month ago. They had Terraform, Vault, Nomad, Packer, Console, and there's Boundary and others.
Vagrant as well, right?
Playground as well. Yeah, they have a lot of those. And basically what they did like a month ago is they decided that all open source project will be in the BSL license, which is called source available, but it's not an open source. That means that you can run them on your like local machine. You can test them. You can run them in production unless you're competing with a cloud offering of HashiCorp. So basically, all of those projects, Hashi has some sort of a SaaS platform to manage those. So they have like Vault as a service and others, and basically what it means that if you're competing with one of their projects, you are no longer, you cannot run their latest version anymore.
So maybe just for context, so before it used to be a Mozilla license, MSL, right? And now it changed it to MPL. So now it's BSL, or Business Source License 1.1. So and MPL is an open source license. It's recognized by the OSI, the Open Source Initiative, and BSL, as you mentioned, is a source available, or at the OSI we call it a Foxpen source license. So maybe better to understand really what it means for us, for each and every one of us.
Yeah. So basically the thing is that Hashi says that if you're just using their products as the open source, you won't get affected. You are able to run them. They have so for example, if you're competing with Vault, but have Terraform managing your infrastructure, you're okay. You can use Terraform. But what it means that if a company that competes with any tool that Terraform offers, it means that it cannot uses the source available projects anymore. What it means to the regular user, so it means that for now, I'll take Terraform and Terraform Cloud as the main topic here, because that's like what I'm familiar with and that's my domain expert here. So now it means that if you're using Terraform, you're just a regular company that uses Terraform, now you're only be able to run Terraform on a SaaS vendor only with Terraform Cloud, for example. So it means you're vendor locked a bit. It means that if you need a SaaS solution, you will have to go with Terraform Cloud. Another thing that you need to understand is that it's no longer open source. I have to say, I'm referring again to Terraform to be more specific here, is that in the last 2 years, they haven't accepted any pull requests from the community at all. It actually has like a big comment in the code itself, and there's actually also a blog post about it. And now, even if you want to, you cannot contribute or have effect on the Terraform project at all. So
Actually, it's funny because Hashi said in its the famous announcement, it said that there are other vendors who take advantage of pure open source models and the community work for their own commercial goals without providing material contribution back. So one of the main claims that Hashi made to justify the change of license was the fact that they're sort of carrying the burden of the open source, while others are freeloaders, if I put it in a free terms. And you're saying that's not the case. You and others wanted to contribute and were blocked from that, right?
So you were blocked for the last couple of years. I know a lot of people wanted to add features and other bug fixes and other stuff to the Terraform project, but you couldn't. And I have to say, if you take a look at the code itself, which we, in the last few weeks, we took a look at the code and we talk about the fork in a bit, you see a lot of things that are not really open source related. So it's more related to the Terraform Enterprise and Terraform Cloud features, which basically made their way into the CLI and the Terraform ecosystem, basically. And you won't see things that are against or come, in a different approach that will hurt Hashi's commercial project, which again, it's legitimate and they have control over the open source and they can do whatever they want. That's fine. But again, it's not as community based as it used to be anymore. And now officially it's not. I mean, you cannot do anything anymore. So even if you wanted to do anything in the Terraform CLI, they wouldn't accept it anymore. And most of the features that you will see there, or a lot of them, were directed into the commercial offering of Terraform Cloud and Terraform Enterprise. There's you can see it in the code, in the comments. It's blunt out there. So I have to say, so for example, there's a really old issue about state encryption in Terraform. This is one of the major issues that Terraform has, the state file itself that uses to manage the Terraform infrastructure and the resources. Basically, it's unencrypted. It's just a JSON file, and this JSON file usually has a lot of sensitive data. For example, like your database connections or other stuff that are sensitive, and those state files are not encrypted. You can put it in an S3 bucket or maybe use Terraform Cloud to do that, but those were not encrypted. Those are plain text JSON files. And basically, there's an issue to encrypt the state file for a long time now. And I don't really know, but assuming that one of the main features Terraform Cloud and Terraform Enterprise has is state management. If you encrypt that, you will, it's against what they're selling, basically. So it means that, they're not really into doing those features that are really community based and the people that are using Terraform wanted. But Hashi as a company has a different view of things. Again, it's not all the cases like that, but there's other use cases that it's like that. So in the last few years, it wasn't really a community base. It wasn't really an open source project. It was by definition, but it wasn't really something that you can affect and have control over and have like significant feature set that you want to bring into the CLI itself.
It's interesting. You mentioned like going into the code and then seeing. I called it code smells, things that are not that don't feel that are purely community. And I've been through a similar experience a couple of years ago when Elastic NV, the commercial entity, relicensed Elasticsearch and Kibana from Apache 2.0 to SSPL, which is another type of source available license or a Foxpen source license. And then the creation of the fork called OpenSearch to keep the projects open, and actually covered the forking process here on the show on Open Observability Talks with Kyle Davis, who was back in the day was the community manager for OpenSearch. And the funny thing is that he also mentioned the fact that he described it very nicely on the show, how when they delved into the code, they saw also all sorts of things that were very surprised, because you expect an Apache 2 license project or MPL in your case to be just, you click the fork button and that's it. You have your own fork, and then you realize that you have a mix up of proprietary code and public code and all sorts of telemetry fetching and dial home features and usage of backend components that are not open, like maps and things like a service and things like that. Really not what you'd expect, and sounds like you've been through this experience as well here with Terraform, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's actually telemetry in Terraform as well, and call home and other features that you mentioned. So yeah, so it's exactly the same. Again, when you have a company behind an open source, which can be great, and the company itself can benefit from it. The major thing that Hashi did was creating great open source tools. I have to admit, Terraform is great. Vault is being used a lot. Nomad, Consul, they're all great tools. But then when the shift tide and the company get access to, they want to monetize that. So the open source tool, for one, they're a great marketing tool because everybody uses it, so everybody knows about the commercial things. But then when you start to implement stuff that are specific to the commercial stuff, I think that's a bridge of open source and the untrusted thing that you need to do when you run an open source. So for us, it was kind of not really surprising, but yet we understood that's something that we should avoid going forward as much as possible. And I think again, that's kind of not where you want your open source project to be like.
And in terms of the contribution, beyond trying to contribute to the core Terraform, you also and your company Env0 are behind some ecosystem tools that enable the community, open source tooling around the Terraform, right?
Yeah. So basically, I just want to mention how Terraform works. There's a few things around Terraform. Terraform has the CLI, the Terraform core, as everybody calls them, and you have the providers. So every provider is like, you have an AWS provider, a GCP provider, an Azure provider, and those are different code bases from the CLI. So basically, the CLI knows to download the providers and run them. But those providers, you have like 3,500 providers out there for a lot of companies. Even M0 as a Terraform provider, so you can configure M0 with Terraform. And you also have modules. Module is like an open source project that you can embed within your Terraform code, and instead of writing all the resource, you have a module that basically wraps things up. In addition to that, Terraform has a huge ecosystem around it. A lot of open source tools around Terraform. You have TF-Lint, you have TF-Sec by Aqua, you have Checkov by Bridgecrew, and now Palo Alto Networks, and you have a lot of community-based stuff around that, or open source around that. But by the way, there's a GitHub repo that is called Awesome Terraform, where you can see all those great tools that you can use with Terraform. And we added TerraTag. TerraTag is an open source that allows you to basically tag your resources on top of Terraform automatically with all your modules and every provider. And basically, you can tag all of those without the need to go into your code and do it. It runs automatically for you and tags whatever you need. So we have this open project to better manage your Terraform overall. I have to mention others, like you have Terraground. Terraground is a huge open source tool that a lot of companies uses that is wrapping Terraform and adds a lot of features on top of that. And I have to say, it came from Groundworks, which is the company behind that, that basically did it because Terraform didn't have those features, and you wanted those features, but you couldn't contribute to those to that open source. And in addition, Groundworks has TerraTest. TerraTest is like the popular testing framework for Terraform. Actually, in 1.6, the newest version of Terraform, which will be BSL, you have a testing feature that is built in. So it took them a long time to get there. So
and
I have
maybe
to
not
say,
surprisingly, why it was only added at 1.6, which is the relicensed one, and not before.
Exactly. Yeah. I have to say, it was experimental for a few versions back. But that's like the major feature that you have in 1.6, the testing feature. And so basically, there's a lot of community around that. So a lot of people and a lot of companies around that ecosystem contribute by donating a lot of open source on top, or stuff that are peripheral to Terraform ecosystem. In addition, I have to say, vendors like ours, they are marketing Terraform. So when we started, we had to market Terraform. So we went to companies and nobody used Terraform or knew about it. And we actually started marketing why you need infrastructure as code, why Terraform is the best tool out there. And we have a lot of blog posts, webinars, and a lot of stuff that contributes not to M0 as a platform, but to Terraform as an open source.
Yeah, and I can say, as someone who's also an advocate for other open source projects like OpenTelemetry and Jaeger and others, that the people think about contribution only in the sense of a source code contributions, but there is an immense value, especially for new projects, in the education, in making it more accessible to people, more comprehensible. So it's definitely something that that should be considered significantly. The popularity of Terraform these days is probably a lot attributed also to the massive education that many community members did around the project.
For sure. for sure. I think both the community, both the open source around that, both of companies that build tools around that. In the security sense, you have like Sneak and Breach Crew and others, and Aqua that does a lot for Terraform ecosystem. In the security sense, you have a lot like InfraCost for cost management. So I think all of those contribute to the popularity of Terraform overall. And as you mentioned, education as well. And education is not done only by HashiCorp. Of course, they're leading that, but it's not only them. It's an ecosystem.
Yeah, and going back to the ecosystem, one of the HashiCorp's claims was that the license change is only an issue to competing vendors, such as obviously your company and Zero. But we started talking about it before, that it's maybe not exactly the case. But now that we understand, you mapped out the ecosystem much better with the modules and with the providers and with the peripheral tools in the ecosystem and the different types. Can we go back and is it really true? What's the impact on end users given the whole and the other ecosystem elements within that?
Yeah, so let's say I'm using Terraform and running it on my GitHub Actions. And let's say I want to run it with the latest version. Well, the latest version is not yet out there, but let's say 1.6 is out there. There's only a beta right now, but let's say in a month or two, you'll have like the official release of 1.6. So let's say I'm using GitHub Action and now I want to upgrade to 1.6. Am I allowed to do that? Is GitHub Action competing with Terraform Cloud? I don't know. I mean, that's what Hashi needs to decide. So, for example, GitLab has a Terraform section in their product. Is that a competing offering for Terraform Cloud? They have stuff like state management and PR integrations and other stuff and other features that you have in Terraform Cloud. Are there a direct competition for Terraform Cloud? I don't know. If I'm using GitLab to run my Terraform, I need to be, concerned about, am I breaching anything? Is GitLab breaching anything? I really don't know. I know that VMware has announced that one of their products, they won't let their users to run Terraform 1.6 because they think they're in breach of their license. And VMware is like a big company that has a lot of products out there, and they don't know it as well, and they prefer not to mess with that. And then Harness as well. Harness became a member of the OpenTF initiative. Again, if I'm using a Harness to run my Terraform, am I in breach? Probably, yeah, because they joined this initiative. So it means that whenever I run my Terraform code within a SaaS product, I'm not sure if I'm in breach. I'm not in breach. Should I continue? Am I fine? Should I not upgrade to 1.6 until the dust is clear and we know exactly what's going on? And who decides what the competition to HashiCorp? Only HashiCorp basically does that. They will decide who's competition and who's not. And again, we're talking mainly around Terraform because I think that's like the main use case there. You don't see a lot of, again, I'm not an expert domain in Vault or Consul or Nomad, but I'm not familiar with those SaaS vendors that compete with HashiCorp. I think most of the talk is around Terraform, and also because Terraform is a bit different than the others. The others are like services. Terraform is a CLI tool that you run, and it's a bit different than running Vault or running Nomad cluster or Consul cluster. It's a bit different by the sense it's a CLI tool that you use locally or in your CI tools. It's a bit different.
I
And
think it's different in another sense, that it's more than just a tool, not even more than CLI. It's a language in a way, right? So
yeah.
maybe if people don't know, not so familiar with Terraform, do you want to say a bit about the HCL and the language aspect has become, I guess, today the de facto language for infrastructure as code?
Yeah, so basically HDL is a language, a HashiCorp configuration language. That's the name of it. And it's like, I don't know, .NET or Java or Node.js or others. And basically they created a language that is a declarative language to manage your infrastructure. And basically when you write your Terraform code, you write it in HCL, and then the Terraform CLI knows to parse it and run it, just like, I don't know, Java does or Node does. So basically, you just write your HCL files, and then Terraform knows how to run it. I have to say, like, there's an open source project by Microsoft that is called Bicep. Bicep is basically an HCL language for ARM templates. ARM templates is the infrastructure as code of Azure. And they said, okay, Terraform is a great tool. A lot of companies uses it. And the main thing between ARM templates and Terraform is that they write in HCL and not like a JSON file. So they bridge that by creating an open source that is called Bicep, that is basically supporting HCL. It knows to parse HCL language and basically run ARM template behind the scenes. So again, it's an ecosystem of things behind what you run and your language and everything. And there's a lot of companies that said, okay, let's do other stuff around this ecosystem to help that and manage that and build a bridge in order to make HCL and Terraform more powerful in that sense. So
Maybe
yeah,
another
HCL is,
example for the ecosystem, a counter example, just to be fair. I just saw that a few days ago that Google announced launching a new service. They call it Infrastructure Manager, which provides Terraform as a Google Cloud managed service. So I guess they had to pull it off in combination with Hashi, or perhaps the relicensing isn't such a big deal for vendors after all.
So I'm not a part of Google, so I'm not sure exactly what happened there. But for Google, AWS also has something that runs Terraform. It calls Proton. They have integration with actually Terraform Cloud as well for service catalog that they announced a few months ago. Google just did something. So basically, I think those are big players that Hashi has like the partnership with them, and they have the incentive to give them the license and decide, okay, I'm okay with AWS or GCP fighting over my clients because I have a partnership with them, and they're like a big player that I don't want to mess with. But again, I don't really know. It's really selective. I mean, as I mentioned before, Hashi will decide who's preaching and who's not, and it's not up to us to decide. It's up to them. It's up to the vendor. And I think
what I've seen in the discussions in the community, in the forums and everything, is how vague the license is. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, so I don't know, but so to speak, that they took the off-the-shelf, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but they took the business source license template or format, the license, and then they added, I guess, just maybe one line or two, but this line is the one that drops the bomb and this one is very, very short and very doesn't elaborate on saying something like very broad, like if you're a competing, or if you offer something competing, then you can't do that. And because it's so broad and so vague, many organizations found themselves thinking, hey, but okay, so am I competing from what I'm doing? Is that's at least what I understood from the forums and the discussions amongst the community members.
Yeah, so basically they took MariaDB BSL license and just copy paste them, and there's like one sentence that says, the one sentence that is different between those license, and basically it means that if you're competing with a HashiCorp product, you cannot embed host or host any of the open source project anymore, or source available projects anymore. And that led to a lot of confusions, and it was very vague. What do you mean host? What do you mean embed? What do you mean by competing? Is it if I'm not competing now, but Hashi will, in the future will create another service that I'm competing with, am I breaching? What about cross? If I'm competing against Vault, but I'm using Terraform, is it okay? What it means? So after they announced it, I think they had like an FAQ for a lot of questions regarding the license, and they had also like an email address that you can basically ask questions. And they updated the FAQ like 3-4 times in the past month or so. They said the FAQ is binding. It's like a blog post with FAQ, and it's a binding document for some reason, which is obviously weird. It's like it shouldn't be a blog post, shouldn't be a binding protocol or document, but
I've never seen a blog post
Yeah.
becoming a legal binding document. And is it even mentioned, linked back from the original license to say, hey, this is an appendix of the...
So in the license is basically something that you write in your Git repository. So I don't think there's link. Maybe there is. I'm not sure. But in the FAQ or the blog post, it says that it's binding. You can clearly see that. So obviously it was really vague. Most of the questions, I have to say, were around Terraform, less around the other products. And it was, I think, intentionally vague in order to, I'm not sure they expected that, things backfiring at them and saying, hey, am I competing or this competing, or am I okay here or not? And I think they got a lot of questions, so they updated the FAQs. Another thing that worth mentioning, as I mentioned, there's providers to Terraform and modules, and there's also the registry. There's a Terraform registry. The registry is also an asset that holds basically by HashiCorp. I have to say the registry is a way to browse providers and modules and see the documentation, that there's like specific API you need to implement in order to be there. But basically they own it. And in the last few weeks, they also changed the terms of service of the registry as well. They actually changed it so nobody besides the official Terraform CLI can use it anymore. They didn't announce it or anything. We just happenly go into the terms of service and saw that they changed it. They actually changed it and didn't change the update date of the terms of service. And then after a few days, they did it. So I think when you look at everything, I think most of the things that they're doing is around Terraform, because I think their intention from the get-go was Terraform at the first place. But it's really weird, and the license is really vague, and a lot of companies that we're in conversation with, they're not really knowing what they should do moving forward and how should they approach this. And also like companies that are not competing, just want to run Terraform and uses Terraform, they not sure that they want to upgrade to 1.6 because it's a BSL.
You mentioned the repository, and I think in essence register, sorry, and anyway, if you already mentioned that, I think it's important. So for those who don't come from the Terraform, I would say it's maybe a bit like a Docker hub or something like that. So it will be the equivalent of Docker maybe not allowing Kubernetes, or I don't know, Podman or AWS public ECR to use the images from Docker Hub, right? Is that a good equivalent?
Yeah, it's a good equivalent. It's like a registry, like a Docker Hub or NPM for Node or other registries. And it's like saying only if you're using the official Terraform CLI, you can use it. So only if you're using Docker, you can use it. If you're using Kubernetes or, I don't know, ECR or other registries or GitHub Actions or whatever, you cannot use it anymore.
So how does that impact the end user using Terraform? What could they do? What could I do before as a user that I cannot do with the new terms of service?
So, for example, if you're forking Terraform and running it without the official CLI or the official version, you're breaching the terms of service. So you cannot use the registry anymore. And it's built in with Terraform CLI. Terraform CLI, there's like the URL of the registry is baked in the CLI.
Yeah.
So you have to fork it and then change it. So there's a lot of things that it might not seem like it affects the end user at first sight, but it will affect the end user in some sort of way.
I think it's important because many that I encountered were not aware of the registry change, and they only saw the relicensing. And in general, I've been trying to tell people that open source can turn to the dark side in many ways, not just change of license. So this is an example, just change of terms of use and terms of service, is also something significant. So let's move on to OpenTF. Tell us about how you came to the decision to fork the Terraform project, and who's behind the project, besides obviously your company and Zero. Give us a bit of the background on the fork.
Okay, so I'll tell you my own personal story. As you mentioned, you were on summer vacation, so was I. I have 3 little kids, and I was in Italy. And then I got the news. I got like a WhatsApp message saying, "Hey, Hashi is changing the license." And then obviously, first thing I did was talk to Ahad, my co-founder and the CEO of N0. And we stayed up all night, basically not sleeping, thinking about what we should do. And then we reached out to Spacelift. Spacelift is another vendor in the ecosystem. Is a competition for Terraform Cloud or N0. And we talked with the founders. We know them. And then very quickly we decided we need to do something about it, because it means that Terraform is not open source anymore, and it means that we are not allowed to run it anymore. And I think there's a few things there. One, obviously, it is directly affecting our business. But another thing is that it's not open source anymore, and a lot of companies may not use it anymore, for sure. I have to say, we're not supporting only Terraform. We're supporting Terragrant, CloudFormation, Pulumi, and others in our platform. But Terraform is obviously the main framework that most of our customers are using. And then we talked to also Scalar and Gruntworks. Scalar is another vendor in our domain. Gruntworks is a DevOps consulting firm, and they are behind Terragrant and Terratest, like we mentioned before. And basically, we said, okay, we needed to start thinking of what we're doing here, because it's not possible that Terraform will not be open source. And very quickly, we said, okay, we need to start thinking about a fork and creating like the new version of Terraform. We started talking between ourselves and created a Slack group, and we basically created the manifest of OpenTF. The manifest is open. It's opentf.org. You can go and see exactly what it means. It's a GitHub repo that has, I think, 35,000 stars. Just to compare, Terraform has like 38,000 stars. And basically, we said, whoever wants to pledge and say, hey, Terraform needs to be open source. And we gave Hashi also the ability to, become an open source and donate Terraform to some foundation that will keep Terraform an open source. So that was part of the manifest, and we gave them like, hey, we would like your direct response about that, but we didn't get any. And then after a week or so, we decided to fork it. So we are working for the past few weeks to fork that Terraform, and a week ago the repo is now public, and you can basically see it and see all the contribution. There's a lot of issue that the community is already, opening, and PRs that actually also merged some bug fixes, a lot of small things that we've decided to implement as well. And we're working on making version 1.6 available as part of on open source. And then we also saw that a lot of companies are, have a lot of interest in that. So right now in the pledge, we have, I don't know, around 150 companies pledging, around 1,000 individual pledging. We also brought a harness as well. We pledged that we will
Brought
have.
harnesses, just to make sure, brought harnesses to the core team. So they're just
Yeah,
pledging. Harness is actually pulling their sleeves up and getting rolling
exactly.
the sleeves up and actually getting involved, right?
Exactly. So
Because pledging is nice, I have seen that.
for
I've
sure.
seen the 30,000 likes and the pledges and everything. But ultimately, as we all know, open source is only as good as the working hands contributing to it. So maybe you can share with us how many actual full-time developers are working on the project.
Yeah. So basically, us, Spacelift, Scalar, and Harness pledged 18 full-time employees. If you take a look at the CLI of Terraform and go to the GitHub repo, you will see in the last year or so, there's only like 4 or 5 main contributors to the core CLI. So we are probably 3, even 4 times as many developers that will be devoted to the core CLI. And we actually started doing it. If you go to the GitHub repo of OpenTF, you will see that there's like a lot of people that are actually working on making 1.6 available for everybody. And we are also part of the Linux Foundation now, which means that we
Yay!
have.
These are good news. You're saying it quietly, but we're now actually recording that in the week of Open Source Summit EMEA in Dublin. Thanks for taking that, by the way, just before going on the plane to Dublin to participate yourself. Unfortunately, I was there last year. I was speaking there, but I will not be here in Dublin this year. But really exciting. So yeah, share with us the news, the big news.
Yeah. So actually, it's going to be in Bilbao, which is
In Bilbao, sorry, I said
yeah,
Dublin because it was last year Dublin,
it's
but yes,
last
it's
year.
Bilbao.
Yeah. So it's actually a harder place to get and reach to, but yeah. So I'm flying in like a few hours to be part of the summit, and we'll basically announce OpenTF being part of the Linux Foundation. It means that OpenTF will be an open source project moving forward, and it will be under a foundation. It won't be M0 or Spacelift or Scalar or Hashi project. By the way, we're welcoming Hashi to contribute to that if they want to. Again, I'm not seeing that happen, but we don't mind. We like people to contribute to the open source and the community. So basically, we are part of the Linux Foundation, and moving forward, we want to be part of the CNCF. It's just a step in the way to be part of the CNCF project, like Kubernetes and Istio and Open Policy Agents and others. And now we have a steering committee that actually all 5 vendors has like a place in the committee. So I'm part of the community. Spacelift has one, Scalar has one, Groundworks has one, and Harness has one. And the steering committee will make sure this project will move forward and being a successful project, both in terms of the product itself and the development of that product, and also educating, like you said. So you need to be aware of what's the difference between Terraform and OpenTF, and what are the features we have there, and how you want to move to OpenTF, because moving forward, we believe that the feature set that we'll have will be way more powerful than what Terraform has, just because it's an open source, just because there's a lot of community people that want to pledge and want to get involved, and we get a lot of great feedback and a lot of great initiatives and ideas on feature sets that we want to build, inside the Terraform ecosystem. And one last thing is that we are also changing the name. So moving forward, we'll call it OpenTofu and not OpenTF. It was basically a mostly legal thing that we initiated. That's why we changed the name, because we were just afraid that trademarks of Terraform will come after us. So from starting in a couple of days, everything will be called OpenTofu.
Yeah, that's a cool name, and by the time the episode is out, it will already be OpenTofu. So I named the episode is OpenTF the way forward, and now I already need to rename to OpenTofu. That's really exciting. I like the twist there with the tofu, and obviously I really like the fact that from the get-go, you've all decided to make it a foundational open source and contribute it to the Linux Foundation and to the CNCF. And not just because I'm a CNCF ambassador in one of my capacities, but also I really believe that, I firmly believe that foundational open source provides a more balanced, neutral ground that maybe counters some of these commercial incentives that may mess into the open source. So knowing that it's not, as you said, an N0 project or a HashiCorp project or anyone else's. It's a Linux Foundation project where you have N0 and Spacelift and many others contributing. However, they don't own it. The owner is a neutral ground of the Linux Foundation, which also makes it maybe easier for the competition, for competitors such as yourselves coming together under one project, which is something that you proved the point that competing projects companies can join forces under an open source, which is like the under message of maybe Hashi and others is it can't be, because if they're competing with you, they're leveraging the open source, then it's against you, and actually there is room for everyone to take part. So I'm really excited about that. And maybe going beyond that, many CNCF projects were affected by this relicensing. The CNCF actually has issued guidelines to its member projects about source available dependencies, essentially instructing them to switch to a different open source tool or to freeze the version and not upgrade to the relicensed release. In Terraform case, it's 1.6, which is of course not sustainable in the long term. So wearing again my CNCF ambassador hat, and I will share it also here with the listeners. If you are maintainers of one of the open source projects in general, and specifically CNCF projects, you do want to look into that, because it's doesn't only affect commercial companies, it also affects other open source projects that make some decisions about their licensing, and this dependency may break this license infection essentially. So license contamination situation. So definitely something to be aware of, even if you're not a commercial company but an open source maintainer.
I can have one example. TF-Lint is embedding Terraform CLI in their project, so TF-Lint will be a BSL moving forward once they upgrade to 1.6, for example, which is a bummer in a way.
So let's talk about OpenTofu. You're preparing, as you said, to the first release. Can you tell us can you share with us what the first release is going to be about?
Mm-hmm. So I think the first releases that will come out will be mostly around backwards compatibility and having everything just a drop and replace for companies. So if you want to use OpenTofu, or just replace the binary and that's it. So we're working on making the testing feature as clean as it could be. We found a lot of bugs that we fixed. We added a lot of unit tests. We needed to change a lot of the code base in order to not violate trademarks, and changing the names, and a lot of stuff around that. Documentation, we had to change some of the documentation. But basically, what we want to create in the first few releases is just backwards compatibility and drop-in replacement. That's like the first few ones. The other ones is basically open.
Maybe before you go to the other ones, I think so. Can you give us, just to make it more concrete to the people, how painful will it be from end users' perspective to migrate from Terraform to OpenTofu?
Yeah, so basically it will be the same. You just have to, instead of installing Terraform on your laptop or GitHub Actions or whatever, you just run and install OpenTofu. And instead of writing Open Terraform in it, you just write OpenTofu in it, or it's going to be tofu actually, OpenTofu, the CLI command. And basically that's it. It's the same code base, it's the same version, it's everything is basically the same. You just need to change the alias of the command itself. If you're used to it, you can create an alias on your laptop, and basically that's it. All you need to do is change the binary.
But beyond the core, because we talked about it before, so Terraform is also thousands of providers and modules, and there's policies that we haven't even mentioned, and the ecosystem of tools. So what about them? Like, what if I use Terraform together with lots of other things around it, obviously not just bare bones? What would that be like in terms of the migration?
Yeah, so the registry, we're basically building the registry. The first alpha will be just a simple redirect. So basically the registry, what it does is redirect you to GitHub. That's basically what it does. So we're building that internally to support the first alpha, and we'll probably have a better solution moving forward. We're talking about how to implement that and searching maybe for an open source project that does that. We have like a candidate that is called Artifact Hub. It's another CNCF project that basically it's an artifact hub, and it might be a good solution for Terraform as well. So we're in contact with them to see if we can manage that. But again, there's an official RFC of changing the registry.
But all the actual providers, so this is just a means to get to the GitHub repo where you have the
exactly.
provider, but the providers themselves, the modules, I don't know, policies that are owned by HashiCorp. Can you give us the ecosystem impact of migrating?
So again, the provider, the modules, you don't have to do anything. You just drop and replace policies. So policies in the registry are just Sentinel policies. Sentinel policies is a propriety of HashiCorp. You can only use it with Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise. So I mean, if you're a customer of Terraform Cloud or Terraform Enterprise, you probably don't need to move to OpenTofu, which is fine. You can use Terraform. So that's like regarding the policies. The major policies that you have within Terraform ecosystem is Open Policy Agent. Actually, Terraform Cloud and Terraform Enterprise now supports Open Policy Agent. And Open Policy Agent is a CNCF project. So those policies are wherever it's like just a GitHub repo. There's no like registry for those policies moving forward. Again, we might have that as well as being part of the CNCF and the Linux Foundation gives you the ability to work with other projects as well. And there's like priority for creating integration between them. So that's about that. Regarding other things, again, besides changing the binary, we reached out to a lot of open source projects like TF Switch and TFenv and other stuff that allows you to manage your Terraform version. So we will be applying PRs to basically to have support of OpenTofu. Same with TerraGrant. TerraGrant now runs Terraform CLI behind the scenes, and obviously GrantWorks is a part of this initiative. So we'll have support for that. So we will have to go out to some open sources and say, hey, let's make sure you're compatible with OpenTofu. And we'll actually be proactive there, and we'll do a lot of the things moving forward. So because they are open source, you can contribute there and just create a PR. And we have a lot of developers to maintain that.
Nice. Actually, I saw on the OpenTofu announcement, actually, when it was still OpenTF, there was a statement there saying that it will be 100% interoperable with future Terraform releases. And the question is it really doable also going forward? If you fast forward, 2 years from now, is that something that you strongly feel as an engineer and someone who maintains code bases? How do you see OpenTofu and Terraform in your personal view in 2 years' time, for example?
Yeah, so it's actually something that we're discussing internally with the steering committee and the companies involved. Basically, maintaining compatibility with Terraform, and basically, how do you do that legally also? Because you cannot copy the code anymore. There's copyrights for Terraform. You cannot actually look at the code because it means that you might copy it in some sort of way. And we actually talked to a lot of open source people that forked another tool, and we, discussed with them, how do you do that? There's a way to do that with clean rooms and doing like going to the releases of those products and finding out what features and bug fixes and then backporting them with your own code. I'm not sure moving forward we'll do that automatically on a feature based. What we think probably will be happening is basically the community will see that Terraform has a new feature and they say, hey, we want the same feature in OpenTofu, and we'll create an RFC for that and an issue for that, and we'll decide if we want to include that in the versions moving forward.
Yeah, and I have to say that you are very transparent in publishing public roadmap on the GitHub repo. So do you want to briefly share the main highlights of, beyond obviously what you said, the immediate goals of compatibility and completing the migration? What are the main feature or product items that you have there?
Yeah, so 1.6, as I mentioned, will be around testing feature, and that's something that we'll work hard on making it better and less buggy than what we introduced. The other thing that we have is the registry itself, and maybe so right now, the Terraform registry is a proprietary API that Hashi invented, but there's a lot of other ways to do registry like OCI that is like more popular and publicly. So we are thinking about how you support that as well as a registry, and not just the registry that you need to implement the HashiCorp API. There's also state encryption that I've talked about. It's something that we see a lot of the community bumping and saying that they want to have that. We already have like an experiment that one of the developers did, and there's like a Twitter around both OCI and state encryption, but it's just an experiment. And I have to say, we are transparent. We are focusing on 1.6 and the testing feature, and we didn't discuss like what will be the main roadmap items moving forward. We want to take it slowly and hear the community and what it has to say. We just got accepted to the Linux Foundation, and we'll probably get a lot of feedback from the community about that as well. So we don't
and we're calling. Let's use this stage as well to call everyone who is in the open source realm, and specifically on the Terraform ecosystem, to reach out to you. This is a new project, and there's a room to influence. And maybe you can tell us all where can people stay up to date with the project and try it out. And most importantly, as we said, they also get involved. I know that you have a new Slack workspace that maybe you want to share.
Yeah. So first of all, the GitHub repo, as you mentioned, is public, and we have the public roadmap there, and we have like an official RFC to provide feedback and get new ideas there, and help with PRs if you want to. We also have, as you mentioned, a Slack community that we started like a week ago, and we already have like 450 members there. And there's like announcement there, and there's like a lot of ideas and a lot of people that are maintaining of other open source that came up with more ideas to implement within the Terraform CLI. And there's an ecosystem around Terraform. We obviously see it. I see it on my private LinkedIn. A lot of people say, great work, and if I can help, let me know. And you can see that in the pledge, and you can see that on the Git repo and the community. And there's a lot of buzz around that because Terraform is a great tool when open source, and a lot of people want to use it. And we think OpenTofu will be the next step there, and building the new Terraform basically.
Cool. So really, I do think that Terraform is today a de facto standard, and that's a language, and this is why we want to keep it open. And it's great to see that. And one of the things that I was missing in the following the project up close, you probably saw me on Twitter and LinkedIn and our chats, was the community component, and seeing the new Slack channel and ability for people beyond the GitHub repo to reach out, to take part in an active conversation, I think is a major step towards opening the discussion, getting more people involved. And also, from my experience, it can't only be a vendor play. So in order to succeed, it needs also end users sharing the lead on the project. I saw examples, and one example that caught my eye when I looked at the pledges is Oxide, the company, for example, that have a like server hardware company using Terraform, and they pledged, or others. So seeing more end users, not just pledging, but actually taking active involvement, I think will also be an important part in getting this takeoff, the lift off. So it's really great. And maybe how can people reach out to you personally and follow you, Omry?
Yeah, so I'm available in LinkedIn, Twitter, GitHub. It's really probably very simple to find me. I'm part of the Slack community, so you can reach out personally through Slack as well, and I'll be available. I'm watching the GitHub repo as well. We get notification on each issue or comment there. So if you want to reach out, or just leave me an email at omry@n0.com. Again, I'm part of the steering committee, so I'll be affecting the Terraform or OpenTofu moving forward. You need to get used to saying OpenTofu. Like
OpenTofu.
It's gonna take a while, yeah. So I'll be affecting that, and I'll be part of the RFC process and the product moving forward, and how we affect that. And I have to say, we are currently 5 on the steering committee, but we want to have more people there, more people from that have influence from larger organization, or have like the background of open source and maintaining community. So that's also a possibility for us to move forward and extending the steering committee, not only for the 5 people that are there.
That's amazing. So really call out for all of our listeners who are really open source aficionados to have a look at this and see how they can contribute and get involved. Thanks so much, Omry, for this chat. And do stay with me for the next section, which is the breaking news. And on the breaking news side, a few things. First of all, at the end of this month, September 28th, 29th, there's going to be PromCon EU Europe. So next month here on Open Observability Talks, I'll cover news from PromCon together with Prometheus maintainer Augustine from Amadeus. And we'll also discuss Perseus, a fascinating new project for visualization and monitoring observability. So do chime in for the PromCon highlights. That's one, and obviously if you can attend in person, that's the best. And the next thing I want to share, which is straightly related to what we discussed here, the OSI essentially released its OSI approved licenses database. It's now available on the OSI website. So the OSI, the Open Source Initiative, is the formal element, a formal body that authorizes the licenses based on the open source definition. So each license is being observed based on its adherence to the open source definition, and then either approved or not. Now you have a very clear database. If you have a license that you're not sure if it's open source or not, you have a very easy way to find that. So that's really exciting. Another one, as I mentioned before, the CNCF published guidelines for using source available dependencies in its open source projects. I'm pasting here the guidelines from the CNCF's official GitHub repo. Also suggest to get familiar if you're an open source maintainer. Another thing that was very much in the news in this realm, besides Hashi, was Red Hat. Red Hat changed the CentOS release process, essentially. So no more CentOS Linux, only CentOS streams. For those who don't have the background, CentOS has been a community build of the RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise version. So it was a community build of that source, providing a robust production distro for those that are okay with not having the Red Hat support. And essentially, when RHEL gets fixed, CentOS aims to have that same fix available within, I think the SLA was 72 hours on its releases, and the new point releases should come out within, 8 to 12 weeks. I don't remember exactly, a few weeks. In other words, CentOS tracked RHEL, whereas CentOS Stream is like a development branch of RHEL. So it's not suitable, let's say, for production workloads. It's more for developers testing applications for the next Red Hat release, something like that. And CentOS is one of the most popular, I guess, widely used open source servers distros, maybe besides Ubuntu. Lots of also distros there, Rocky Linux, Alma Linux, Oracle, obviously, and others. So that shuffled the realm in the Linux, and it's not relicensing. This is just change of the release terms. So you can see that the release process. And even then, a response came. SUSE, Oracle, CIQ joined forces to found OpenELA to have a foundational equivalent for that. Omri, have you heard about that? Any insights from your experience in that?
Yeah, I heard about that. I have to say, I'm mostly involved in the OpenTF initiative, so it just backfired off my head, basically. So I wasn't really involved in that. I heard SUSE got upset as well and said that, okay, let's fork it as well and let's do our own thing, but I'm not in the details. I have to say the last month or so, it was like really brutal here.
I could only imagine. Forking is a major undertaking, so I could only imagine. Anyway, I'm also pasting here for our live stream audience, and I will also put it as a show notes for the listeners of the show, of course, as always. And with HashiCorp and Red Hat and many others, many came to me asking how they can protect themselves. So if you are using open source tool, or in the process of vetting a new tool for your framework or something like that, I provided a useful checklist for just making sure that you're playing it as safe as possible. I'm pasting it as well here. I think this is as much as we can have time for today's show. So I wanted again to thank you very much, Omri, for being with me on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and for all the audience, thank you very much for joining us for this episode. As always, all the episodes are available on the favorite podcast app or on YouTube, so just check them out. Last Thursday of the month, the episodes are published. And if you are listening to it on demand, do know that we do stream the episodes live on Twitch and YouTube Live, so you can find all the details by following us on Twitter @OpenObserve to get the live stream times, updates, to share your comments, suggestions, news bits, and so on. I'm Dotan Horvitz, and thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to seeing you on next month's episode following PromCon. And as always, may the open source be with you.